Hey, today we are going to be talking about the standard 8.1.5 again. However, we're going to be talking about the second part of the standard. The first part of the standard talked about the House of Burgesses, the English Bill of Rights, and the Mayflower Compact. The second part focuses on the social structures that formed in the various colonies. So I feel like this needs its own video. First, we're going to look at the topics that we'll find in this section. Colonial trade, colonial government, Great Awakening, and the Enlightening are the four things that we're going to focus in on this video. In the next video, we'll discuss slave trade, triangular trade, and the Middle Passage. Our focus question for the day is what role did the role of trade and government, play in the idea of colonial self-government? We're going to start off with trade. English practiced the economic theory known as mercantilism, or the belief that colonies existed for the benefit of the mother country. In this case, the mother country is England. This theory builds up a nation's gold supply and expands its trade. Mercantilists thought a country should export more than it imports. In the 1650s, the English Parliament passed a series of navigation acts that regulated trade between England and its colonies. In this graphic, you can see how the Navigation Acts enforced mercantilism. You have the colonies over on the left-hand side trying to decide what they're allowed to import and export. And then you've got the Europeans on the right-hand side putting their taxes on everything and causing difficulties with colonial trade. The Navigation Acts also listed products such as tobacco and cotton that colonial merchants could only ship to England, which is going to reduce the amount of other nations and countries that they're going to be able to trade with. As far as government goes, we looked at the Mayflower Compact, the Virginia House of Burgesses, and the English Bill of Rights. And when we looked at those, we noticed some of the features, such as a governor. A governor was appointed by the king and directed the colony's affairs as well as enforced laws. Each colony had a legislature or a group who had the power to make laws. In most colonies, the legislature had an upper house and a lower house. When we discussed bicameral institutions earlier, this is what it was referring to, multiple parts of the government. The upper house was made up of an advisor which was appointed by the king. The lower house was an elected assembly that protected the rights of the citizens. This diagram shows you how each of these different parts of the government were broken down and what their roles were. Town meetings were held to discuss and vote on many issues. By the 1720s, all of the colonies had laws that restricted the right to vote to white men who owned property. Women in the colonies had more rights than those in England, but far fewer rights than white men. Widows had a little bit more rights because they did not have a man to stand in their way to help them make decisions and have contracts or legal representation. So therefore, widows were able to make contracts and sue in court. Africans and Native Americans in the colonies had no rights. So that was just a really quick discussion about trade and government. But I also think it's important that we talk about the Great Awakening and the Enlightenment because these two ideas are going to have a huge impact on what's going to lead to the American Revolution. So this is also a huge part of colonial life. Therefore, we are going to see how these change the thoughts of the colonist. The Great Awakening was a religious movement. If you remember from the video about the different colonies, many of the people that came over to settle in the new colonies came for religious reasons. So during this time of the Great Awakening, preachers were urging colonists to examine their lives and obey the Bible. This sparked bitter debates between colonists, and it often split churches. The growth of so many new churches forced the colonists to become more tolerant of people with different beliefs. People became more independent, and they were more willing to challenge authority when the liberties were being challenged. European thinkers believed that all problems could be solved by human reason. This is going to be the beginning of the Enlightenment. Enlightenment thinkers looked for natural reasons that governed politics, society, and economics. One of the key Enlightenment leaders is John Locke. John Locke argued that all people had natural rights, the rights of life, liberty, and property. He also believed that these rights are inalienable, which meant they cannot be taken away. He challenged divine right, which is the belief that monarchs get their authority to rule directly from God. He did believe, however, that natural rights come from God. He argued that people form governments in order to protect their rights. Benjamin Franklin was an Enlightenment thinker that wanted to use reason and logic to improve the world around him. 3 of his inventions included lightning rods, smokeless fireplace, and the bifocal glasses. Although we remember Ben Franklin as the creator of electricity, he was so much more than that. He was a very prominent Enlightenment thinker and played a huge role in the American Revolution. So, thinking about it, how did the ideas of the Great Awakening and the Enlightenment period lead to the American Revolution? As we get further into our studies, we are going to see that several of the things we've discussed this far are going to cause people to develop their own thoughts and ideas. So think about this question, discuss these ideas, and let me know what you think. And as we learn a little bit more, we will see how the Great Awakening and the Enlightenment period are going to lead to the American Revolution.